Imagine this. You're living in a palace, ruling the largest empire on earth, surrounded by gold, guards, and all the power in the world. But when your son gets sick, who do you call? Not a doctor, not a general. You call a barefoot peasant from Siberia who smells like he's never seen a bathtub, stares at you like he can see your soul, and claims he talks to God. And he actually helps. That guy's name was Rasputin. And for a few years, he was the most dangerous man in Russia. Not because he wanted the throne, but because the people who had the throne listened to everything he said, even as the whole empire started collapsing. Hey friends, welcome back to our channel. I'm Nathan. So this is an English shadowing exercise. To get value from it, you must practice, not just listen. Listen carefully. Pause when you need to. Repeat, or try to repeat, each sentence out loud. The sentences in this story are kept simple and clear, so they're easier to follow and shadow as you listen. Don't stress about being perfect. Progress comes from repetition, not perfection. So let's start. Rasputin was born in 1869 in a tiny frozen village called Pokrovskoye. We're talking deep Siberia. This place was like the Wild West, but colder, lonelier, and way more dangerous. His parents were peasants. His dad farmed and delivered messages. His mom gave birth to 7 kids before him. All of them died young. Rasputin was the first to survive the brutal Siberian winters. Locals said he had powers even as a kid. He could see things, know things about people he shouldn't. They said he healed sick animals just by touching them. Some thought he was a prophet. Others thought he was the devil. And honestly, both sides might have had a point. In his teens and early 20s, Rasputin was straight up wild, drinking, stealing, cheating on his wife. He got married young and had a few kids, but didn't exactly stick around to raise them. Then, one day, he stole a horse. And instead of owning up, he ran to a nearby monastery, hoping to hide out. That decision changed everything. The monks there convinced him to turn to God. One of them, a man named Makarij, took Rasputin under his wing. He started fasting, praying, and wandering from village to village like a holy man. But he wasn't exactly your clean-cut preacher. He didn't bathe. He wore shackles to feel pain. He claimed he could see visions from heaven. And on those long, lonely journeys through the woods, he found a group that took religion to a whole other level. They were called the Kleistes, an underground sect of the Russian Orthodox Church. They believed salvation came from purging sin through pain, pleasure, or both. They choked themselves to get high, speak in tongues, spin in circles till they passed out, and then, giant orgies. Rasputin didn't just join. He blended their rituals with his own version of Christianity. When he came back to his village, he was different. Creepy stare, bigger ego. He told his wife he needed the basement for religious meetings, which turned into something more like cult sleepovers. His neighbors were freaked out. But Rasputin? He said he was just doing God's work. Then he claimed he saw the Virgin Mary. She told him to go to St. Petersburg to help the royal family. And even though that sounded insane, a peasant healing royalty, he went. Turns out his old mentor Makarij had connections, important ones. He wrote Rasputin a letter of recommendation. And in 1903, Rasputin walked into the big city like some backwoods Jedi with a mission from God. He met top priests, including one named Eliador. At first, everyone was horrified. He looked dirty, smelled worse, and his stare could melt your soul. But then they saw him heal someone, and just like that, the smelly mystic was being called a saint. That's when he met Princess Milica and Anastasia of Montenegro. They were royal in-laws, super into mysticism, and total outsiders in the palace. People called them the Crow Sisters because of their sharp features and spooky vibe. They loved Rasputin's whole act, so they brought him into their circle. Right around that time, the Tsarina, Alexandra Romanov, was desperate for a new spiritual advisor. Her previous mystic had died, and her young son Alexei had hemophilia, a blood disorder that could kill him from even a small cut. It was a secret. No one outside the family knew. But one day, when Alexei got injured and wouldn't stop bleeding, Rasputin showed up at the palace, uninvited, and said he had a vision that the boy needed him. They let him in. He prayed over the boy, told the doctors to leave, and somehow Alexei got better. Whether it was hypnosis, luck, or just telling them to stop giving the kid aspirin, which worsens bleeding, it worked. And from that moment on, Rasputin had a place in the palace. So Rasputin saves the Romanov's son, Alexei. Kind of a miracle, right? At least, that's what Alexandra thought. From that day on, she believed Rasputin was sent by God, not just as a healer, but as a protector of the whole royal family. And Rasputin? He leaned into it hard. He started calling the Tsar and Tsarina Papa and Mama. He tucked the kids in at night, told them bedtime stories, led them in prayer. From the outside, it looked sweet, but inside the palace, some staff were freaking out. One maid claimed Rasputin had assaulted her. A nanny tried to keep him out of the nursery. Both women got fired because Alexandra trusted Rasputin more than anyone, and now he could do no wrong. The Tsar was dealing with major headaches. Literally, Rasputin offered help. He gave him morphine, opium, and even cocaine as spiritual medicine. They got high together. The Tsar started depending on him. The Tsarina, too. She suffered migraines and panic attacks. Rasputin would calm her down with prayers, herbs, drugs, and his weird hypnotic stare. Soon, he was at the palace every week, not as a guest, as an advisor. At dinner parties, Rasputin would show up looking half dead, pick his nose, eat it in front of nobles, and mock the rich ladies. But no one could say anything, because Papa and Mama loved him, and Rasputin knew it. Back in the city, Rasputin had his own apartment. That's where his real following gathered. It wasn't priests and nobles. It was mostly women. Lots of them. They'd bring food, sit around the table, stare at him while he mumbled into space and scribbled nonsense on paper. And, somehow, that made them fall harder for him. One woman left her husband and kids to live with Rasputin full-time. She made people call him God. One eyewitness said they walked in on her, holding his junk and screaming, "You are Christ, and I'm yours." Yup, Rasputin wasn't just running a cult. He was the cult. Remember Bishop Hermogen and Eliador? The guys who first vouched for Rasputin. Yeah, They started to regret that. Once stories got out about Rasputin screaming in bathhouses and bringing in prostitutes, they decided to confront him. They cornered him, said he was channeling the devil, not God. At one point, Hermogen grabbed Rasputin by the crotch and yelled, "You think with this, not your brain." Then they beat him with a giant wooden cross. No joke, but Rasputin tattled. He told the Tsarina they tried to murder him. She exiled them both. Iliador fled the country dressed as a woman, and just like that, Rasputin had 0 rivals in the church. But outside the palace, people wanted him dead, and one of them was Iliador. Even in exile, he kept plotting. He found a woman named Khionia Guseva, a former prostitute with a twisted backstory. Her face was disfigured, nose cut off, big scar across her mouth. He convinced her Rasputin was evil, said he was hurting women like her. She agreed to help. In 1914, while Rasputin was visiting his home village, Guseva waited outside his house. When he walked past her, she pulled out a blade and stabbed him in the gut. Hard. Then she reached in and tried to rip out his intestines. That same day, Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo. World War I was beginning, and Rasputin was bleeding out in the dirt. He survived. Barely. He spent weeks in a Siberian hospital recovering, while the empire and the world started to fall apart. From his hospital bed, Rasputin wrote a letter to Tsar Nicholas. He begged him not to go to war. He wrote, "We will drown in blood. The disaster is great. The misery infinite." But Nicholas didn't listen. People were fired up. They wanted glory. And Rasputin wasn't there to change his mind. So the Tsar went off to war. And guess who stayed behind with the Tsarina? Yup, Rasputin. With Nicholas gone, Alexandra basically handed the government to Rasputin. He picked ministers, appointed officials, made major decisions, all while being completely unqualified to do any of it. The people noticed, and they were pissed. Food was running out. Prices were up. The war was killing millions. And Russia's fate was now in the hands of a creepy cult leader who smelled like garbage and hung out in bathhouses. The newspapers tore him apart, but the Tsarina refused to let him go. She said his guidance came from God, even as the empire started to collapse. By 1916, Rasputin knew he was running out of time. He was sick, tired, and the chaos around him was getting louder. The war was going terribly. The people were starving, and the Romanovs were completely out of touch. Rasputin kept saying he saw visions, that demons were clawing at him in his sleep, that death was coming soon. Then he wrote a letter, a creepy one. It said, "If I am killed by common men, you, Tsar of Russia, have nothing to fear. But if I am murdered by nobles, then you, your children, and all of Russia will be killed by the Russian people." That wasn't just a warning. That was a prophecy. At this point, everyone with power knew Rasputin had to go. They blamed him for the war, the famine, the national embarrassment. But the Tsarina wouldn't listen. So a small group of nobles took things into their own hands. Leading the charge was Prince Felix Yusupov, the richest guy in Russia. He was young, spoiled, and married to the Tsar's niece. He was also obsessed with Rasputin. At first, Felix tried to study him, even invited Rasputin over for spiritual healing. But what he really wanted was a clean way to kill him. Eventually, he teamed up with a few other conspirators, including a politician, a soldier, and even a royal doctor. The plan? Lure Rasputin into a private mansion and make sure he never walked out. It was the night of December 30th, 1916. Prince Felix invited Rasputin to his palace, said his wife was hosting a party downstairs and wanted him to come bless the house. Rasputin showed up in his usual rags, looking like he just woke up in a ditch. The moment he walked in, the weirdness started. They led him to a small basement room and offered him cake and wine. Both were poisoned with enough cyanide to kill 5 men. Rasputin ate it, drank the wine, then sat there, chilling, not even sweating. Felix panicked. He made up an excuse, ran upstairs, and told the others, "He's not dying," the part where it gets insane. So Felix grabbed a revolver, came back down, and shot Rasputin in the chest. Boom, right in the ribs. Rasputin collapsed, eyes open, not breathing. They assumed it was over. The group started planning how to get rid of the body. But a few minutes later, Rasputin moved. He stood up, eyes wide, blood pouring from his shirt, and he charged at Felix, screaming. The other men ran. Rasputin made it up the stairs, out the door, across the snowy courtyard, still alive. The men chased him, shot him again, this time in the back. He dropped, but was still breathing. So they walked up, put the gun to his head, and pulled the trigger. That should have been it. But they were not taking chances. They wrapped his body in cloth, tied him up with chains, and threw him into the frozen Neva River. 3 days later, they found him under the ice. The autopsy said the poison did not kill him. The gunshots did. But the final cause of death was drowning. He was still alive when they tossed him in. Rasputin died hard, just like he lived. A few months later, Rasputin's prophecy came true. The Russian people turned on the Romanovs. The Tsar was forced to step down. The whole royal family was arrested. And in July 1918, less than 2 years after Rasputin's death, they were executed in a basement by Bolshevik soldiers. No trial, no ceremony, just bullets in the dark. Everything Rasputin warned about happened, almost word for word. The empire was gone, and Russia would never be the same again. The myth that wouldn't die. So here is the thing. Rasputin's body was gone, but his legend, that thing, exploded. Almost overnight, stories started flying. People said he was immortal, a wizard, a demon. Some claimed his severed head was still alive. Others said he hypnotized the entire royal family and destroyed the empire from the inside. None of that is true, but you cannot really blame people for thinking it, because even the real Rasputin was strange enough to feel like fiction. Was he really that powerful? Let's zoom out. Rasputin was not officially in the government. He never wore a crown, never held a title, but behind the scenes, he was calling shots. He influenced military moves, cabinet appointments, health care for the heir to the throne. And the worst part? He had no idea what he was doing. He was just making stuff up, praying and vibing. It was chaos disguised as spiritual advice. And it ended up being one of the key reasons why the Romanovs fell. It is like handing the steering wheel to a guy who thinks he is Jesus and watching the car flip. So what was the truth? This is where it gets weird. Some people, especially back in the day, thought Rasputin was the Antichrist. Other people thought he was Christ, returned to earth. But most historians today see him as something else entirely. A manipulator, a cult leader, a guy who understood power, not through politics, but through people. He knew how to make people feel something. Whether it was fear, awe, or comfort, he made them believe. And that belief gave him control. After he died, people tried to erase his memory. The Bolsheviks burned his body. Some rumors say his penis was cut off and kept in a jar in a museum. Yeah, we are not making that up. It is a real urban legend. Others say his daughter, Maria Rasputin, escaped to the West and became a lion tamer in a circus. That part is actually true. She lived in America for a while and gave interviews about her dad. She said he was misunderstood, that he only ever wanted to help. But the world was not ready for him. And just when you think the story's over, in 1978, a band called Boney M drops a song called Rasputin. You know the one. Ra Ra Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen. Absolute banger. Catchy. Weird. Dramatic. Just like the man himself. It blew up in Europe, came back as a meme decades later, and introduced Rasputin to a whole new generation of kids who had no idea he was real. Now he has been in horror films, fantasy novels, even cartoons and video games. The guy just refuses to disappear. Here is what is wild. Rasputin did not build an empire. He did not invent anything. He did not write any books that changed the world. But he lived like a glitch in the system. A peasant who wandered into the halls of power and somehow bent an empire around himself. His story is a warning that sometimes all it takes is one person with the right words and the right audience to bring down the whole thing, even if they do not mean to, especially if they do not. Whether you think Rasputin was a madman, a prophet, or just a lucky cult leader, one thing is for sure. He left a mark, and not just on Russia. On the way, we think about power, influence, and how fragile the people in charge can really be, even if they are royalty, even if they have it all. Because when the wrong person gets in their ear, everything can fall apart. If you completed this shadowing exercise, you are doing it right. This is how fluency is built. Repetition and consistency. Keep shadowing like this. Stay consistent, and your English will improve naturally. If this video helped you, I would appreciate a like or a subscribe. See you in the next episode.